I'm Savannah. 22. I stood in my vintage lace wedding dress, the desert sun already warming my skin, and looked down at my father. He was sweating in his expensive suit, his face red and blotchy, holding a microphone from the camera crew he'd brought with him. My mother Angela stood next to him, dabbing at fake tears, while my sister Zoe adjusted her pageant sash as if this was her stage. Not my home, Savannah. Honey, my father said, his voice pitched for the cameras. We just want to celebrate with you. Family belongs together. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I reached into the pocket of my dress. Yes, I had pockets sewn in for this exact moment, and pulled out a single, crisp check. $12,500. I said, my voice cutting through the dry air. This is the tuition you stole. Adjusted for inflation. This clears the debt. I handed it to him. He took it automatically. Confusion, warring with greed in his eyes. Now get off my land. Before I explain why I handed my parents a check on my wedding day, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your peace? I want to know I'm not alone. 8 years earlier, the piece of paper in my hand wasn't a check. It was an acceptance letter to the state university. The first tangible proof that I could escape the orbit of my parents' delusion. I was 18. Naive. And I had packed my entire life into 2 battered suitcases. Ready to leave. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for my parents to come home so I could show them. I knew they wouldn't cheer. Cheering was reserved for Zoe, but I thought they might at least be relieved I was launching. When Jeffrey and Angela walked in, they weren't looking at me. They were flanking Zoe like she was a head of state. Zoe was glowing, holding a rhinestone-encrusted sash from a local mall pageant. We need to have a family meeting, my mother Angela said, her eyes bright with a manic sort of energy. Sit down. Savannah. My stomach dropped. I leave for orientation in 2 days. Is this about the car? It's about the family's future, my father Jeffrey said. He placed a brochure on the table. It was for The Crown, a new reality TV pageant series promising instant celebrity status for the winner. Zoe has been scouted. The producers love her look. They think she's the next big thing. That's great, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But what does that have to do with me? Entry fees, my mother said, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. Coaching, travel, and the gown. She needs a custom gown by Galia Lahav to even be considered seriously. Okay. We used the savings account. Savannah, my father said. The air left the room. Which savings account? The education fund, he said, not even blinking. It was $15,000. It covered the dress and the first round of fees. I stood up, my chair scraping violently against the floor. You spent my tuition money, all of it, on a dress. It's an investment, my mother snapped, slamming her hand on the table. Zoe is going to be a star. This family is finally going to be somebody. You can't be selfish right now. You can take a gap year. Work. Save up. But this window for Zoe, it closes now. I looked at them. And for the first time, I didn't just see bad parents. I saw a sickness. I didn't have the vocabulary for it then. But I understand it now. In a narcissistic family system, children aren't people. They are mirrors. Zoe was the golden child because she reflected their desperate, starving ego, their need for fame, status, and external validation. I was the scapegoat because I reflected their shame. I was ordinary. I was studious. I represented the boring, working-class reality they despised. They didn't just love her more. They needed her to feed their delusion. And they needed to sacrifice me to pay for it. I can't go to school, I whispered. We have a solution, my father said, pulling out his car keys. Your grandparents, George and Clara. They need help at that apiary of theirs, out in the desert. We're driving you there tonight. The bee farm, I asked. Horrified. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a place to stay, he said coldly. Since you can't afford the dorms anymore. The drive took 6 hours. I sat in the back seat next to Zoe, who was furiously texting on her new phone, completely unbothered by the fact that she was wearing my future on her back. We drove out of the suburbs, watching the green turn to brown. The concrete turned to dust. The air conditioning in the car was frigid. But outside, the heat waves were already shimmering off the asphalt. When we pulled up to the gate, my heart broke. The apiary wasn't just rustic, it was dying. The fences were leaning. The house was peeling. And the air was thick with the menacing hum of a million insects. It looked like a graveyard for dreams. Get your bags, my father said, popping the trunk. They didn't even turn off the engine. They dropped me in the dust with my 2 suitcases. Eager to get back to the city. Back to the cameras. Back to the golden child, who would surely save them all. I watched their taillights fade into the heat haze, leaving me alone in the silence of the desert, with nothing but $15,000 of stolen hope and the sound of bees. The silence of the desert wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. My grandparents, George and Clara, weren't the cookie-baking, storytelling type. They were creatures of the high desert, weathered, tough, and sparse with their words. You afraid of a bug, girl? Grandpa George asked the first morning, watching me flinch as a worker bee buzzed past my ear. It has a stinger, I said, my voice tight. Everything out here has a stinger, he grunted, handing me a veil that smelled of smoke and sage. Cactus, scorpions, sun. You learn to respect the sting, or you die. The first month was a blur of scorching heat and physical agony. I learned that beekeeping wasn't a hobby, it was warfare with nature. I lifted heavy supers until my back screamed. I spent hours scraping propolis, my hands sticky and stained. And yes, I got stung. The first time. My hand swelled up like a balloon, throbbing with a hot, red pulse. I sat on the porch that night, nursing my hand in a bowl of ice water, watching the stars wheel overhead. I had a phone. I could have called a friend, begged for a bus ticket, run away. But I didn't. For a long time, I told myself I stayed because I had no money. But looking back, I know that wasn't the whole truth. There is a concept in psychology called learned helplessness, the invisible chain. It's like an elephant tied to a stake as a calf, even when it grows strong enough to snap the chain. It doesn't try. Because it has learned that resistance is futile. I was the elephant. I was the worker bee who believed the hive couldn't survive without the queen. Even if the queen was consuming all the resources, my parents had conditioned me to believe that my only value was in service to Zoe's brilliance. I stayed in the desert not because I was trapped by fences, but because I was trapped by the belief that I was nothing on my own. I thought I deserved the sting. Bees don't sting for hate, Grandpa told me one afternoon, watching me extract a frame. They sting to protect the hive. They give their life for it. Your parents. They sting for pleasure. There's a difference. That was the moment the chain snapped. I looked at the bees. Thousands of them moving in unison. Productive. Fierce. Loyal. They built something tangible. They created sweetness out of dust. My parents had stolen my tuition, but they hadn't stolen my brain. I started reading George's old almanacs. I studied the local flora. I stopped seeing the bees as my jailers and started seeing them as my teachers. They didn't care about beauty pageants or reality TV. They cared about work. And, for the first time in my life, I realized that real, tangible work was something nobody could take away from me. The desert heat didn't feel like oppression anymore. It felt like a kiln. burning away the soft, pleasing girl I used to be, and hardening the woman underneath into something that could survive the fire. I didn't just survive the desert, I learned to cultivate it. It started by accident. One afternoon, while checking the hives near the wild sagebrush, I noticed the honey had a different consistency, lighter, floral, with a hint of purple. I tasted it, and it was like liquid silk. It wasn't just sugar. It was the essence of the high desert. I called it Violet Dawn. I bottled 50 jars and took them to the Santa Fe farmers market. I was terrified. I stood behind my folding table, wearing my work boots and a clean shirt, watching the tourists pass by. Then a man stopped. He was tall, with sawdust on his jeans and a kind face. "Is that local?" he asked. "Harvested yesterday," I said. "5 miles from here." He bought a jar. Then he bought 3 more. His name was Tyler, a local carpenter who built custom furniture. He told me my table looked like it was about to collapse and offered to build me a proper display stand in exchange for honey. That was the first transaction of my empire. Tyler wasn't just a carpenter. He was a craftsman. He built me hives that were works of art, durable, beautiful, designed for the health of the bees. We worked side by side, his hammer echoing the rhythm of my smoker. He didn't care about TV cameras or fame. He cared about wood grain and joinery. He was solid. With Tyler's help, I expanded. But expansion costs money, and the farm was drowning. I found the foreclosure notices buried under Grandpa George's almanacs. My parents hadn't just abandoned me here. They had leveraged the property for secret loans to cover their gambling debts and Zoe's pageant fees. The bank was coming for the land. I needed $85,000. I didn't panic. I didn't call my parents. I went to the library. I researched agricultural grants for women in innovation. I found a niche program for preserving native pollinators in arid climates. It was a long shot, a grant usually reserved for university researchers. I spent 3 weeks writing the proposal. I poured everything I had learned into it, the unique adaptability of our bees, the symbiotic relationship with the desert flora, the potential for sustainable growth. I didn't have a degree, but I had data. I had 4 years of daily logs, temperature readings, and harvest yields. I submitted the application at 11:59 p.m. on the deadline day. 6 weeks later, the letter arrived. I opened it on the porch, my hands shaking so hard I tore the envelope. "We are pleased to inform you." $85,000. It was enough to pay off the immediate arrears and invest in new equipment. I walked into the kitchen and slapped the check on the table in front of my grandparents. "This saves the farm," I said. "But I have a condition." "What is it?" Grandpa George asked, looking at the check with wide eyes. "I run the business, fully, and my name goes on the deed." They didn't argue. They signed. And just like that, the Honey Queen was born. 5 years later, my life was unrecognizable. The dilapidated apiary was gone. In its place stood Honey and Sage, a luxury organic skincare and culinary brand valued at $4,500,000. We had contracts with high-end spas in Santa Fe and exclusive resorts in Aspen. My hands were still calloused, but they signed checks now that could buy my parents' suburban life 10 times over. Zoe's trajectory had gone the opposite direction. The Crown had been canceled after 2 seasons. She had spiraled into a series of public scandals, a DUI, a leaked video, a failed clothing line. She was a fading star burning up on re-entry. I should have known they would come back. Parasites always return to the host when they get hungry. They arrived on a Tuesday, rolling up the long gravel driveway in a rented luxury SUV that was already coated in desert dust. I was in the processing facility with Tyler, inspecting a new shipment of Italian glass jars. Tyler stepped between me and the door, wiping his hands on a rag. "Heads up. Vultures at 12 o'clock. I stepped outside to meet them. My mother Angela emerged first, sunglasses and heels sinking into the soil as she surveyed the place with thinly veiled disgust. "Savannah, look at this quaint little setup." My father, Jeffrey, followed, eyes fixed on the solar panels and stainless steel tanks. To him, it wasn't a farm, it was an asset. Zoe climbed out next, pale and brittle, already recording herself. "Hey guys, we're at my sister's bee farm." So rustic. I didn't offer hugs or hospitality. "What are you doing here?" "We have news," my father said, running a hand along one of the trucks. "Zoe's doing a reunion special, The Crown Redemption. The producers want her reconnecting with her roots." I am as it. My mother gestured vaguely at everything I'd built. "This dirt versus glamour contrast is perfect." "We'll film here 6 weeks," Zoe added. "We'll need the main house. You and your boyfriend can stay in the barn." They weren't here for me. They were here to consume what they thought they could still take. "No," I said. My father laughed. "Don't be difficult. The exposure will help your little honey business. And this land is family property now that your grandparents are gone. We have rights." I saw it all clearly. Then they believed they were returning to reclaim what was theirs. They had no idea I held the deed. "If you don't cooperate," he warned, stepping closer, "we'll sue for partition. Zoe is just as much an heir as you." My mother folded her arms. "And you owe your sister. We need assets for her legal team. Signing over 50% of the company is reasonable." I walked to the oak table and opened my leather satchel, pulling out a thick blue folder. "Do you know what this is?" "Another grant," Zoe sneered. "It's a deed. And an adoption decree." The driveway fell silent. 3 years ago," I said, sliding the document toward them. "Grandma Clara and Grandpa George adopted me as an adult. They knew about your debts and what you would try to do. This was the only way to protect the farm." My father grabbed the paper, color draining from his face. "This can't be real." "It's completely real. Legally. I'm not your daughter. I am George and Clara's. I'm the sole heir. You have no rights to this land at all." My mother swayed as if hit. "You stole our parents from us." "No. I cared for them while you chased red carpets. They chose me just like you chose Zoe. People think DNA is a binding contract, but contracts can be voided after enough cruelty. My adoption wasn't revenge. It was survival." Zoe stared at the decree like it had ended her career. "You're a monster." "No," I said, taking the folder back. "I'm a businesswoman, and this business is closed to you." My father looked at the check. I handed him $12,500. The exact amount they once stole from my tuition. To him, it was an insult. To me, a receipt. "You think you can buy us off?" he shouted. "We planted the seed. You abandoned the seed," I said. "You don't get credit for the harvest." The camera crew kept filming. Zoe instantly shifted into a tearful performance. "Savannah, please, this is your wedding day. Can't we heal? For the fans." She needed a reaction. I gave her nothing. "Cut the feed," I told the cameraman. He hesitated until Tyler came down from the altar. "Every inch the builder who made this place." He pressed a hand over the lens. She said, "Cut it. Pack up. Or the sheriff, who's a guest, will remove you." My mother gasped. "You wouldn't arrest your own family." "I would," I said, "and I'd sleep fine." My farm hands formed a wall. "Escort them out," I ordered. "Press charges if necessary." "Savannah," my mother shrieked as they lifted her by the arms. "Who will walk you down the aisle?" "I walked myself through hell for 8 years," I said. "I can manage 20 feet." Zoe screamed about contracts. My father threatened lawsuits. My mother wailed about ungrateful children. Then the gates clanged shut behind them. Dust settled. Peace returned. I turned away from the emptiness they left behind. Tyler waited at the altar. My grandparents' chairs were draped with sunflowers. My friends and workers stood smiling. I adjusted my veil. The air smelled of lavender and victory.